Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to this council meeting. I'd like to welcome those who are attending in person and all of those who are joining via webcast. Before we begin, I call on Councillor Lamb to give the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you. On behalf of all present and those watching on webcast, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands in which we meet and pay our respect to the ancestors and spirits past and present. This land where our chambers stand was never ceded. The process of taking it was not peaceful. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. We have two applications for remote access to the council meeting. Councillor Godfrey Santa and Councillor James Spenceley, moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Mutton. Put that to the meeting. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Welcome to Councillor Santa and Councillor Spenceley. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor Lapouris.
I have a pecuniary interest in item 10.7. I will excuse myself.
Thank you. Are there any others? No. This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. I'll just remind councillors, council staff and members of the public who are in attendance that you must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during meetings of the council, and councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media activity must leave the chamber to do so. That takes us to the confirmation of minutes. Is there a mover? Councillor Lamb, seconded by Councillor Welsh. Any discussion? I put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. There has been a registration for a speaker on an item 10.3, 12 to 14 Waters Road, Neutral Bay, Voluntary Planning Agreement, Post-Exhibition Report. And so I would call on a mover, Councillor Beregi.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move 10.3 forward to allow the Speaker.
And to open
the public forum.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Burke. I'll put that item. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That brings us to the mayoral minute, reducing waste and its impact on the environment. I don't intend to speak at length to this item. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. This council has a commitment to environmental sustainability. Waste is one of the most important functions that this council and councils across the country have in order to contribute towards a reduction in emissions. The Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Council recently held a waste forum and as summit, and as part of that, they called on all of those who participated to put forward a minute such as I have put before you. It is self-explanatory. It talks about us resolving to work with councils across Sydney to reduce waste, to find solutions for the residue that is left and to coordinate our advocacy, communications and collective buying power to bring scale, benefits of scale efficiency and industry confidence. We're calling on both the federal government and the New South Wales government to invest in the revenue and provide it to councils across New South Wales in particular and the country. And so I urge you all to support it. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, no, it's a very good mayoral minute. Thank you for bringing it forward. I just have a comment rather than a motion. A few months ago, I read the minute at home, and I certainly agree with it and agree with the approach. And again, I come back to the issue of our curbside collections of rubbish, which all go to landfill. And I think, could I ask a question, Mayor? Did that come up at the conference or at the forum? Was there any discussion about
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, not specifically
Okay.
curbside.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to say again that I know our surrounding councils have taken the initiative to just lessen the frequency of those curbside collections, with the intent that if people can't dispose of something so quickly and easily, they might think about giving it to someone else, repairing it, repurposing it, etc. So our surrounding councils have done that. But I just wanted to say again, when I raised this at council via a notice of motion, there seemed to be no interest in us even discussing that. So it'd be interesting to know, I know what our surrounding councils do, the NESROC councils, it'd be interesting to know what the other councils are doing with curbside waste, what the City of Sydney are doing. But I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention because I think some of our residents might see a bit of inconsistency there because the stuff that's thrown out in the curbside collections are really often large, bulky goods which take a lot of landfill. So I continue to be concerned about that waste.
Thank you. Councillor Welsh and then Councillor Santa. So I'm aware that you wish to speak, Councillor Santa. Councillor Welsh.
Okay, I campaigned on bringing food organic waste, which is 40% of red bin waste, recycling to North Sydney. Trying to divert waste from landfill is fraught. The region doesn't have enough processing infrastructure, waste, and collection sites. The council is trying to decrease waste from going to landfill through recycling programs. North Sydney Council has a system whereby you can purchase composting bins and worm farms at a 50% discount. Many community gardens accept food scraps. An education campaign to encourage being more mindful in the way you shop so as not to create waste in the first place. The products that end up in, the state and federal governments need to go harder on banning products that end up in landfill. With our growing population, we are falling behind. Working as a group with other NESROC members will hopefully increase our voice, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. In supporting the recommendation, I also like to refer to the food and organics waste. I've done considerable work in looking at other councils and what the work that they've done in ensuring that food and organic waste does not go into landfill, but instead is processed into compost. This would ensure far less methane emissions coming out of landfill and would be a worthwhile purpose for the disposal of this waste. So I support the motion completely, and I think that we should be taking steps as a council in joining the other more than 40% of councils around New South Wales who have adopted a FOGO, food and organic waste processing system, for us to get going on that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment in reference to Councillor Gibson's point. I'm definitely interested in the curbside collection. You know, we should have a more circular economy, so that's an issue that I'm very interested in and happy to work with you on to bring that to a head and give our community more of an opportunity to have a say. I'll also make the point that it is really important in this excellent motion that the federal government steps up to ban products that can't, packaging that can't be recycled or reused. I also think it's incumbent on our council to provide a better bin system so that when a resident or visitor in our local street has some rubbish, that there are options for them to put that in a bin that can easily be recycled and not get contaminated into landfill. So I think there's things we can do across the board. Thank you, Mayor.
Can I actually see the recommendation on the screen, Mayor, because I don't have it in front of me?
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? In the absence, I'm going to put the item. All those, well, it was published and there. I'm going to put the item. Thank you, Councillor Gibson. All those in favour? Thank you. That was carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we move to the... well, the item has been finished and voted on. Thank you. We now move to item 10.3, which was brought forward. The planning, the post-exhibition voluntary planning agreement in relation to 12 to 14 Waters Road. There's one registered speaker, Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. If you would come forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillors. My name's Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. I'm a resident of Cremorne. I ask you to support the recommendation because it provides a few breadcrumbs for council. This VPA and this development demonstrate what a dud the Military Road Corridor Planning Study was. The study identified a decline in local jobs as a big concern. In terms of this site, the study identified a height uplift of 1 storey and a corresponding increase in the non-residential floor space requirements. The rationale was to ensure commercial floor space was provided in the centre. What's the outcome? The demolition of 2 office buildings replaced by a residential building with a shop in the basement. The current rumour in Neutral Bay is the shop is going to be a BWS liquor store. It's no replacement for office space. Another objective of the study was to leverage public domain and facilities embellishments and improvements. It identified acceptable height increases and encouraged landowners to put in planning proposals and negotiate on public benefits. Residents were told the more height we say is acceptable, the more public benefits we can get. But that's not how it works. Developers are smart and they employ smart town planners. And smart town planners will argue that council has already identified an increase in height and density as acceptable and therefore it's acceptable. And they'll likely win that argument. Strategic planning isn't about offering deals to landowners. It's about ensuring development is planned strategically. It's about addressing how people live, work and play in a given area. It's about planning the buildings, open space and infrastructure to make a place healthy, attractive, efficient, convenient, sustainable. A place which attracts businesses and a place where businesses thrive. In this VPA, the developers, the boys from Central Element, as Councillor Spenceley called them at a local precinct meeting, are offering $1.9 million in exchange for an additional storey. They say the additional storey is for 6 3-bedroom apartments. A back of the envelope calculation shows they'll build those for $750,000 each and sell them for $5 million each, a net increase in value of some $25 million. So the boys from Central Element will give council 8% of the $25 million and get to keep 92%, $23 million, as pure profit. With the revised Neutral Bay planning study, council should stop pandering to property owners. Instead of a policy of hoping for breadcrumbs, a policy which developers can easily get around, it should look at today's best practice in Sydney. For example, incentives policies. The City of Sydney is concerned about climate change. It gives a floor space incentive for developments that is more environmentally sustainable. The Hills Shire Council is concerned about apartments that are too small. It gives an incentive for developments with apartments that are larger than the minimum. You can, if you want, use a no loss of commercial floor space clause to stop developers targeting office buildings for redevelopment as apartment buildings. Canterbury Bankstown has that in its Campsie Town Centre master plan. You could introduce a voluntary planning agreements policy. The City of Parramatta, their policy requires a contribution of 50% of the
That's
uplift
your 3 minutes.
for community infrastructure. I'll finish off.
Did you say the City of?
Parramatta. Imagine if the boys from Central Element had to hand over 50% of $25 million. They'd still be making over $12 million profit and council would get more than a few breadcrumbs.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speakers? Yeah.
Besides, I'm looking for a market value. So City of Parramatta gives 50% of the value uplift.
The value uplift, correct.
Are there other councils giving similar ratios?
That's one that I'm aware of. I think it would be worthwhile for council to investigate and see what's being done around the Sydney Basin. So I think that's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the speaker?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke.
Thank you for that information. So 50% of the uplift in property value would go to the local council as the VPA effectively. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I've got it here, in fact, City of Parramatta. City of Parramatta Planning Agreements Policy adopted by Council 26th of November 2018. And yes, it is the property, it's the increase in value of the property as a result of a rezoning.
Thank you. A couple of quick follow-up questions. So that's in Parramatta. Is that having any perceivable negative impact on development in Parramatta, number one? And number two, what's that being used for?
Okay, well, number one, despite some grumbling by developers, development is proceeding apace in Parramatta, and I believe it's actually brought some certainty to developers because they know what percentage it is that they're expected to hand over. So there's none of this trying to negotiate or bargain with council. There's some certainty there. And sorry, your second question was? Was
something to do with what's it being used for?
Well, community infrastructure in general terms.
And one final question, Mayor, which has now escaped me because of that previous question came. Yeah, sorry, I've lost my questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for your participation. Is there a motion? Councillor Welsh, seconded by Councillor Gibson. Is there any debate? I'll put Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I support this motion. It would be foolish of us to not support this $1.9 million gift. However, I do see great merit in getting, my questions come back to me now, because effectively what I see here is that developers are getting a free windfall gain of land uplift as well as profit on the sale of the build and sale of the apartment. So if you had a betterment or rezoning tax or a VPA if you prefer, the developers are just contributing to our community with infrastructure, and then on top of that they're still making money on the building and selling of apartments. So they're double dipping if you like, and so I do see a lot of merit in looking further at this issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other? Councillor Mutton.
I'm really taken by the notion of a betterment tax, however it might be characterised. When we see this increased level of development in our local government area, it puts an increasing strain on the community infrastructure that we have now. I think we would be so much better off if, rather than doing, if you like, ad hoc agreements for various sites, if we adopted something similar to the Parramatta approach, which simply laid down that there's a percentage of the capital uplift should come to council, rather than, as I said, project by project, because by going project by project, we leave ourselves open to be gamed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Gibson.
Yes, I was just going to put forward an amendment. I thought we should have, in view of the conversations, number 4, that we have a briefing on what the City of Parramatta is doing in this space and give us some information.
Will the mover take that on? Thank you. It's taken on by the mover and the seconder. Thank you. So the motion is the recommendation and that there be a briefing on VPA policies and approaches from the City of Sydney and Parramatta. If there's no further debate, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. That takes us back to the agenda. The first item is item 9.1, Sport and Recreation Reference Group Minutes. Is it moved by Councillor Beregi? Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh. Is there any discussion? Councillor Welsh.
The New South Wales Department of Education has implemented a policy that allows for the sharing of school infrastructure assets with local councils. This policy is aimed at maximising the use of school facilities outside of school hours to benefit the local community. Under this policy, local councils can enter into agreements with the School Infrastructure New South Wales to utilise school infrastructure assets such as sports fields, halls and classrooms for community activities and programs. This arrangement can benefit both the schools and the local community by providing additional spaces for recreational, cultural or educational activities. The North Sydney LGA is crying out for recreational spaces as demand far outstrips supply. Council, working with SINSW, can provide increased facilities for our local community, which I think is a terrific initiative. I would like to see more of our local private schools doing something similar for our local community. I support the recommendation.
On the item, those online? No? In that case, I put the item. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 10.1. Is there a mover?
I move only part one of the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Welsh. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. When we're dealing with issues of privacy, people have different levels of tolerance for privacy or scrutiny. And their levels can change with the passage of time. So I don't here take any issue with the litigation that has taken place, because it is open to any member of our community to challenge our council on any of its conduct. But what I do take issue with is the area where we claim legal professional privilege or we claim public interest as a reason for departing from transparency. Now, legal professional privilege is a right, it's not an obligation, and it's a right that can be tested in other forums. And it's a right that should be exercised when you are representing the community. It should be exercised rarely rather than frequently. And when I read the advice, and I'm not going to talk about what's in the advice, I noticed it covered almost entirely matters that are currently covered in judgments published by the court. So it seemed to me to claim legal professional privilege for a document from a lawyer that does little more than report what has gone on and make a suggestion as to a course that might be available. I thought the community would benefit by having access to that document. And I read that document closely, and there was nothing in it that would enable the identification of the person who is the applicant. But that then caused me to go and read the judgments, a tedious exercise at best. But what surprised me when I read the judgment from October 2021, it contained two pieces of information that enabled the applicant to be clearly identified. So what's concerning me is, one, we're claiming professional legal privilege on a document which would serve the community well if it was made public. And we're claiming public interest on a document which would serve to inform the community rather than not inform the community. So I took exception to item 2. But item 1 is simply to accept receiving the report. And going forward, I think we as a council should be very careful not to step into the citadel of secrecy behind arguments of legal professional privilege unless there is a very clearly articulated argument supporting that claim. And we should be extraordinarily careful not to claim public interest privilege, given that we are here to publicly administer the local government area. And we should, as far as it is possible, make available to the community the information upon which we base our decisions. But as to the underlying matters, they're a matter of litigation, they've been debated, they're not ones that I can hear tonight add any value by further discussing, and I won't. And as to the legal costs, perhaps it's my background, I'm simply not surprised by the quantum. Litigation is not cheap. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Gibson, you wish to speak?
Yes, and I would like to start with a question to the General Manager, if I could, through you, Mayor. I just want to ask, does being absent from an item of business presented to this council negate a councillor's obligation under our code of conduct when it comes to conflicts of disclosure of interest, which is point 5 on our agenda today. So if you simply leave a meeting, is that the same? How does that work?
Through you, Madam Mayor, as council is aware, it is a matter for councillors to declare conflicts of interest.
Okay, good. I would also like to highlight that the cost of this to our community, and this was only for the first term councillors, this was only one of the costs. There was actually more costs than this, and it went well over $100,000, which is quite a lot of money in the scheme of things. And I agree with Councillor Mutton that I believe there's no reason why this has been kept confidential, and I think it's in everyone's interest to have the information so that we don't keep making mistakes over and over again. If councillors have all the information, then it's good governance, and it's a learning process for us. We then perhaps make different decisions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other debate?
Just a reply.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Burke. Sorry, if Councillor Mutton's already spoken, he has a right of reply. So if you wish to speak, now's the time.
Yes, just briefly, thank you for that addition to the debate to all councillors, and especially Councillor Mutton, who's got a background in law. My understanding of this was it is about affecting the council's ability to manage legal matters effectively, rather than a privacy issue per se. That's the advice I've got here in a report. So it is, I think my perception was that you placed more weight on the privacy issue, and so I would be that's not really what I'm focusing on here. I would be focusing more on council's ability to manage legal matters effectively going forward.
Thank you. Is there any other, before I call on you for your right of reply, are there any other speakers? No, thank you. You have your right of reply.
I'll be exceedingly short. The motion is to receive the report. I have expressed a view about the citadel of secrecy. I would leave it to the executive of this council because they have the responsibility of running a litigation portfolio, if you like, where there are often complexities that don't reach this forum. So that's why I've steered clear of to receive the report and make the statement that it is for the executive to make the decision in the administration of the various cases. I've steered clear of that.
Thank you. The right of reply having been given, I put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That is carried. With all of those against? Yes.
Is it moving
the item before us is point 1 of the recommendation, which is that the report on the case be noted.
Okay.
So we're midway through the vote. I've given you that clarification. I'm going to put it again. I'm re-putting the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item 10.2. Councillor Lamb.
Yes, thank you. I would like to move the motion, and I have a third recommendation, which I have sent in beforehand. I'll just wait for that to come up on the screen. I'll read that out for all those who cannot see the screen properly. That the North Sydney Council send a copy of this report to the MP of Climate Change, the Honorary Chris Bowen, the MP of the Environment, Penny Sharp, and the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, and ask them what else we can do to prevent the effects of climate change. Also, to ask him how they, on the state and federal levels, are planning on fighting the causation of climate change and its related disasters, such as floods, fires, and the environmental extremes, including the mitigation of Australia's dependency on fossil fuels, the largest causation of climate change in the world.
Could I just ask Councillor...
You do. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Welsh.
Could I just ask Councillor Lamb if she'd take on a small point? Could we also add the Leader of the Opposition there? If we're writing to everyone else, I think it's good to write to the Leader of the Opposition as well. Sure. Is that okay?
Thank you. And the seconder takes that on. Thank you. Do you wish to speak? Could you turn your microphone off? Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the staff for consolidating North Sydney's many programs and previous climate change-related efforts into one document, as when working in government of any scale, it always helps to make our information as precise and accessible as possible. While we have many professionals looking through our reports, most of the time those who look through progress reports on climate change are students who are forced to look. And such, I want to thank the staff for putting time and effort into helping those who want to learn and have access to useful local government sources. This report was also useful for many ways, for it showed how in 2016, Council did its first climate change response report by assessing the best tree canopy strategy, which, while it prioritised character and aesthetic over everything else, it had the right spirit. In 2018, North Sydney adopted the Resilient Sydney Strategy Plan, which advised prior preparation to natural disasters. It was here that North Sydney was undeniably fully informed on how to face climate change with on-the-ground effort to directly help the people, such as preparing houses for extreme temperatures, creating incentive for development of resilient structures, enable affordable access to renewables and resilient energies, or measuring metropolitan carbon emissions. Here the message was clear. Local government had to step up and make plausible and initiate plans on dealing with the effects of climate change by ourselves. And some divisions of North Sydney Council have hit it out of the park. With dedication and ingenuity, the Bushcare Strategy Team has tailor-made tree recommendations for future plantings to fight the extreme effects of climate change, as seen in the 2022 Bushland Management Plan. There's also been a strong consensus of ingraining climate change resilience into our management and core values of the Council, as seen in the 2040 Community Strategic Plan, with strong objectives for the Council to move away from dependency on climate change-related stresses. But all these actions will not stop climate change. Local government has no power to stop the giant conglomerate fossil fuel companies pumping emissions into the atmosphere, or the mass littering of manufactured goods or fast fashion into our environment. Local government cannot commit to a new clean power source without state funding or create sustainable transport systems alone. Local government does not have the funds or the power to stop climate change, no matter how much initiative we take in the meantime. We cannot pretend that if the plastics stop using plastic straws or recycle correctly, everything will be fine. And while I support the second recommendation to ask for grant money to improve Council's resiliency plans, for what other rational options do we have? We need to ask the state and federal government for more. This is why I'm asking the Council to write to the MP of Climate Change, the MP of Environment, and the Prime Minister, and now the Opposition, to specifically ask them how are they going to help local government help ourselves, and how they plan on making meaningful change to climate change once and for all. We cannot use a band-aid fix on a bullet hole-sized issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Just before we put it, could I ask that rather than MP of, we put Minister for each time MP is cited, if you and the seconder would take that on? Okay, with that change, I put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. That takes us to item 10.4, Development Applications Received Quarterly Report. Is there a mover? Councillor Welsh. A seconder? Councillor Lamb. Is there any discussion? No, I put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Item 10.5, Review of Senior Staff Policies. Is there a mover? Councillor Welsh. Seconder? Councillor Lamb. Any debate? I put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously.
Recommendation for
10.6 moved by Councillor Beregi, seconded by Councillor Lamb. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wish to make a comment. So as we can see, if we read this report, there's a minimum amount and a maximum amount that council can pay councillors and the mayor. I just wanted to make a comment that I believe our residents would think that if we give the maximum salary for the mayor, which is $73,440, that would be a full-time position.
Point of order, ma'am. There is no evidence to suggest that our residents believe that at all. It's never been asked.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll rule in your favour in that point of order. Is there any other debate on the topic? Thank you. I'm going to put the item. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. That takes us to item 10.7. I'll just allow Councillor Lapouris to leave the chamber.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I'd like to also move that we go into a closed session because I'd like to discuss the parts with the confidential report.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that course? Councillor Burke. I'll have a separate motion procedurally to go into closed session. Councillor Beregi, seconded by Councillor Welsh. We'll put that item. All those in favour?
I'm voting against.
That's carried with Councillor Gibson against. So we will go into closed session so that we can have the discussion. There is a motion that will be before us in that closed session, which is the recommendation moved by Councillor Berrigan and seconded by Councillor Welsh.